Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where today we're going to look at a bunch of projects coming together in Tinseltown. And a lot of them are on your smaller screens. And that's something that's going to be addressed in the viewer question as well. So we're going to go full circle. I love it. All right, so the first story of the day involves HBO, but I want to start with what went on with Apple, because that makes this particularly dramatic and gossipy. All right, so hot off of Big Little Lies, Reese Witherspoon did what you're supposed to do, and that's she used that momentum to get herself a mega deal. But it wasn't with HBO. HBO is doing Big Little Lies Season 2, which Reese Witherspoon will also be involved in. She's not only an actor in these projects, but a producer. That's her second lease on her career, interestingly. Well, I don't know, maybe even her third, because she started out kind of just being a generic ingenue in Hollywood. Then she became this little comedy dynamo, right, with Legally Blonde and stuff like that, romantic comedies, and now she's reinvented herself again as a TV star. And of course, Apple picked up a behind-the-scenes morning show comedy with her and Jennifer Aniston, where they each get paid, as we've discussed before on this show, $1.25 million per episode. Wowza! But HBO is currently fighting for its life. I think the stakes are that high, with Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, and of course now Apple, which just took one of its big stars. So HBO, I think interestingly, was like, we don't need you, Reese Witherspoon, to do cool stuff, so we're going to take your writer from Big Little Lies, David E Kelley, and also your co-star, Nicole Kidman, and make a limited series. And also, sidebar, David E Kelley is married to Michelle Pfeiffer, and I don't have any idea why he isn't putting her in these TV shows, because she certainly is a fit with the other actresses that are being cast, and she is a named talent. I mean, she's also going to be the original Wasp in the upcoming Ant-Man and Wasp sequel, and she was already on HBO recently as Ruth Madoff in The Wizard of Lies opposite Robert De Niro, although I have to say, she wasn't great there, so maybe I've just answered my own question. But I don't know, I'd find a place for her. I mean, I would think that she would, every morning, when David E Kelley wakes up, she'd be like, what are you going to work on today? Maybe going to write a role for me? Because he's just making show after show after show. But this show that Nicole Kidman is going to star in, and not Michelle Pfeiffer, is called You Should Have Known. Again, it's a mini-series, just like Big Little Lies was a mini-series. Sometimes I suspect they just categorize these this way so that they can be in a less competitive Golden Globes and Emmy category, right? Because you're like, what's the difference between this and a regular old Season? Especially because Big Little Lies is coming back. And they're like, don't ask me questions that I don't want to give you the answer to. But it's about Nicole Kidman plays a wealthy New York therapist whose life and family violently fall apart. It's got something to do with her husband, apparently. And it's a psychological thriller. And I guess You Should Have Known means like, you should have seen this coming, lady. But obviously she did not. I think it sounds pretty good. I would worry that it would be a bit too much like Big Little Lies Season 2 and would dilute both in terms of tone, and not only visually with having Nicole Kidman on screen again, but also it's the same writer, David E Kelley. And as anyone knows who's familiar with David E Kelley's body of work, the man doesn't exactly have any range, right? It's not like, ooh, I didn't know David E Kelley wrote that, right? Although, to be fair, Big Little Lies, I think, is the first thing he's done outside of that like legal comfort zone that he existed in for so long. So maybe he'll surprise us. But I think maybe they should have gotten another actress, and not even Michelle Pfeiffer. Maybe it would have been nice to get some diversity in there. I mean, we've got a whole lot of white ladies on these shows, and of course also Zoe Kravitz, but she's in a small supporting role. And they're all different types of actresses. Even some, let's say, not a blonde, because in Big Little Lies, of course, it was, with the exception of Shailene Woodley, mostly blondes for as far as the eye could see. Some great blonde acting, though. Laura Dern was great in that show, too. If you haven't seen Big Little Lies, I highly recommend that you watch it. You're going to want to be able to jump into Season 2 when it comes out, and it's just really good. Now, at the beginning, you might be like, this isn't good, Grace. Why did you make me watch this? If you watch it all the way through, trust me, the payoff is amazing. And like the last episode in particular, it all comes together beautifully. All right, so for the second story of the day, I guess, how do you feel about all these shows? Do you think there's a sameness to them? Are you watching them? Would you have gone with Nicole Kidman on this other project? And also, what do you think of the fact that Big Little Lies didn't open doors for other actresses, but just for everyone who was involved with that project? Because as we know, Hollywood hates to take a risk. All right, so for the second story of the day, I guess Jake Gyllenhaal had a good experience with Okja, and I sure enjoyed his wacky supporting role there, because he's going to be doing another Netflix movie, this time where he stars, and he's reteaming with Dan Gilory when they made Nightcrawler. That was the first film they did together, again for a Netflix movie. I'm so excited. I love Nightcrawler so much. Although it's a little sad that this has to go to Netflix, because I don't know if Netflix will truly support it. They don't have a great track record when it comes to movies. And I feel that, Jake Gyllenhaal, for all the talk of him being the next Batman potentially, let's be honest, the guy can't get any work these days. It's crazy. I mean, why would you cast him as Batman when he can't get any other movies? It's really, and he's so talented. But, nobody seems to care. From Hollywood to also trickling down to audiences who don't go see his movies, and Hollywood goes, we were right not to cast him. And it's a shame. I think he's extremely talented. But sometimes that's just the way it goes. It's unfortunate. But anyway, I don't need to know anything else about this film. I will watch it because I liked Nightcrawler so much. Also the film that put Riz Ahmed on the map. But please don't break my heart, Gyllenhaal and Gilroy, as Duncan Jones did with Alexander Skarsgård and Paul Rudd on Mute. I would like to continue to believe that you are all talented. I wouldn't blame Alexander Skarsgård and Paul Rudd too much on Mute, but boy, it really put a giant question mark on Duncan Jones's ability, in my opinion. By the way, Alexander Skarsgård is also in Big Little Lies and won a ton of awards for that film. So Mute didn't really hurt him too much. I don't know. I'm sure he wishes Mute hadn't come out right after he won all those awards and kind of muted that momentum. This new movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and Dan Gilory is a horror thriller, oh boy, set in the LA art world. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, it sounds so good. Renee Russo will also star, and she was in Nightcrawler, as you might recall. But get this, the reason she's in these movies is because she's married to Dan Gilory. See, David E Kelley, it's not so hard to put your wife in the movie. Michelle Pfeiffer should be like, Renee Russo has a good husband. What the hell, man? The reason this is in the news is that they just added some more people to the cast. Stranger Things is Natalia Dyer. She is, co-stars with Charlie Heaton in those episodes, those seasons. Zawe Ashton and Tom Sturridge have also joined the cast, and it'll be hitting Netflix later this year. I hope it's good. And I hope that people realize that it's available, which is the case so often with Netflix movies. Now, Hollywood is a tough business, and luckily, Bill Condon is still making movies, but not one he originally intended. His Bride of Frankenstein is on hold, as we all know. Universal is like, well, this monster's universe didn't work out so well, dark universe. So they've put Bride of Frankenstein on hold, and perhaps it's just completely dead, and it's kind of just like, it'll be the movie we don't talk about, because maybe someday it'll come back, but it's unlikely. But Bill Condon has definitely found something worthy of his time in the meantime, and that's an adaptation of The Good Liar. So Ian McKellen will star, who of course famously worked with Bill Condon on Gods and Monsters, which interestingly enough was the story of James Whale, the director of the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Not only an openly gay filmmaker at that time period in Hollywood, which is interesting, but an incredibly talented filmmaker. Those are two very well-made movies. You should definitely watch the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. They're incredibly well done. And especially when you consider the limitations of filmmaking at that time. What's able to be accomplished is amazing. But anyway, here, Ian McKellen will play a con artist who meets a wealthy widow played by Helen Mirren, online. So I think that's great. So it kind of has like I hope it has more of like a highbrow, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels kind of feel to it than like today, all those like paycheck retiree movies that Alan Arkin and Morgan Freeman keep starring in, right? Where they're like, you'll see it eventually. And I'm like, I will not. But somebody must be seeing these movies because they keep making them. But here, Ian McKellen so he's a con artist, and he feels he can get one last con to retire on by wooing a wealthy widow and getting her to give, or having her let him into his life and steal all her money. But as he becomes a part of Helen Mirren's life, he discovers he actually is getting along with her, and he's not sure what to do. Now that sounds cute, right? Like I don't know, like a Nancy Meyers movie, right? But I looked into the book that's being adapted, and I guess I should have known better since Bill Condon wants to make it, not Nancy Meyers, that it's described actually as a thriller, and then Ian McKellen's character has a very surprising and complex and interesting past. So I think this sounds very good. I think with those two actors, McKellen and Helen Mirren together, it's at least worth streaming, but hopefully it's worth seeing in theaters. Now on that note, I have an interesting question here from Ksenia Bazan. And Ksenia says, "Hi Grace, I'm really into directors like David Fincher, David O. Russell, or Tom Ford, but I'm not sure if these days they can make movies like they used to in the past. And it makes me sad," Ksenia says, "because I really like seeing their work on the big screen. Are those types of movies fading away? Will I have anything to watch in a theater of this type in 10 years? That's a really interesting question. I hope you see my question and reply either on a viewer question section or in the comments." You got the big screen, Ksenia. I picked your question for today's episode. Now, I wish I had better news for you, but I think the sad reality is that type of content has gone to television, right? David E. Kelley's shows that he's making, from the Big Little Lies seasons to this new You Should Have Known. Gilroy and Gyllenhaal going to Netflix, right? Nightcrawler was that type of movie, and then the follow-up will be on Netflix. And then also David Fincher has gone to Netflix quite successfully, producing some of their best shows, from House of Cards to also Mindhunter, which is a gem of a Netflix show if you have not seen that one. Very creepy, but very good. Like David Fincher. So I think the only thing you can do is get a bigger television, I'm afraid, because I think that with the economic costs of going to the movies these days and the amount of time people have to go to a movie, and it really is quite an endeavor to go to a movie. There's a lot of stress about worrying if someone's going to ruin your movie-going experience, right, by misbehaving in the theater, because the theaters aren't willing to police anyone's behavior. I think people are only willing to go for that big-ticket blockbuster that needs to be seen on the big screen. Of course, there are exceptions, but not usually. Even like something that seems like a smaller movie, like The Greatest Showman, or let's say Peter Rabbit, are still not the type of movie that you're looking for. It still, has a big picture quality to it. So award season is the only thing keeping those types of movies alive. For instance, speaking of Dan Gilory, he did Roman J. Israel, right? Nobody went to see it, but it got an Oscar nomination for Denzel Washington. So those movies will still exist to some degree in that arena, but it's definitely slimmed down. So I don't think they'll ever totally go away, but you might not be able to go to the movies outside of awards season if that's the type of movie that you're interested in. But I think on the bright side, TV is the best that it's ever been. There's amazing content to watch there, and you're getting what are essentially 8 to 13-hour movies, and that's pretty awesome. All right, so thank you for your question, Ksenia. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think today's top 3 stories. Ksenia, I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. Ksenia's viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and of course any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.